Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Travel with Rick Steve Zero. I'm Lisa Friend, and I'm delighted to be both your host and moderator this evening. So please join me because tonight we have the pleasure of hosting my friend and fellow tour guide, Blue Badge Guide, Jeannie Carmichael. Jeannie, welcome.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
We are so glad you're here. Where are you? What time is it? What's going on?
Well, I've just come back from snowy Manchester in the north of England. I had the great pleasure of escorting a terrific high school band from Manchester in Minneapolis. So hi, guys, if you're watching. I'm back in London now, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, and it stopped snowing. That's the good news.
Is it normal that there would be snow in Manchester in April?
Oh, absolutely not. I can't remember when I last saw snow here. It was really strange.
Okay, that's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you say. Are you having any jellied eel or bangers and mash with your snack tonight?
I love you, Lisa, but you know, some things are a bit too far. What I'm doing, I'm having a nice cup of tea, cup of tears. And as you say, it's too early for all that stuff. So I am having a nice piece of red velvet cake, which is one of the Queen's favorite cakes. And I'm also having, now I call them scones because I'm common, but if you are posh, you say scones. And there's two ways you can eat them. This way is with the jam on the bottom and the clotted cream on the top. That's the way they do it in Cornwall. This is the way they do it in Devon. You see cream first, jam on top. They insist it tastes differently. I can't see that personally, but try it both ways. Double trouble, why not?
Okay, well.
Which one do you like best, Lisa?
I didn't know what I was going for, but I've done is it the Cornwall way?
The Cornish way, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I'm representing with just jam because I have this wild huckleberry jam from Montana.
Ooh. Should be strawberry, of course, but we will forgive you.
You told me before that you didn't know huckleberries were real, so I was trying to show you in the jar that they were.
I didn't believe you that they were real.
I'm also having some tea in my cup. Now, do I have to put my pinky up? Because this is a lot to do.
Only if you're terribly posh.
I'm not terribly posh.
Yes.
So you talking about your treats there brought up a question to my mind. You said red velvet cake. Now, I was always told that red velvet cake was an American invention.
It is. But the Queen really likes it, apparently. Her very favorite is chocolate biscuit cake, which is evil and wicked, but delicious. Oh. I don't know how she stays so slim, but there we go. But she really likes red velvet, as who wouldn't? It's delicious.
Oh, that's so good to know. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we are talking to you, Jeannie Carmichael, Blue Badge London Guide. I have heard that you do more of the 1 week Best of London tours than any of our other guides. And so I thought that people would like to know, what is it about London that keeps you coming back again? When did you fall in love with London?
Oh, I have to make a true confession here, Lisa. Even as a teenager, I used to play hooky from school. And I grew up in Wales, in the capital city, Cardiff. I used to hitchhike, obviously without my parents' knowledge, up to London, which would take about 3 hours, hit the boutiques, buy the amazing clothes that you couldn't get in Wales, hitchhike back home without my parents knowing. I had the first miniskirt in Cardiff, which actually caused traffic to stop.
I bet it did.
I mean, if I wore a miniskirt now, it would cause traffic to stop for different reasons. But, you know, those were the days, the glory days.
You should put that on a business card.
So I've always wanted to get to London, always.
You should put that on a business card. I had the first miniskirt in all of Wales. You're a brave soul and a true traveler at heart, Jeannie.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Would you like to travel along with me now on our show?
Absolutely.
All
Let's
right,
go there.
let's do this.
This time, we'll see the old London and the new London. Enjoy some of the city's traditional pomp. Hop a double-decker bus to Christopher Wren's magnificent St. Paul's. Check out the vibrant scene in Soho. Ponder some of England's greatest names in Westminster Abbey. Discover treasures in the British Library and straddle the Zero Meridian in Greenwich. But first, we're checking out the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. Beautiful weather, lots of royal pageantry, and a huge, excited crowd. The changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace is a fine introduction to London. While no longer ruling a vast empire, London is still a capital of regal traditions. This time-honored ritual still stirs English hearts. And while you have to be very tall or very early to actually see the guards change, I get a kick out of watching what seems like every tourist in London gathered together in one place at the same time. Today, England's royal family calls Buckingham Palace home.
Jeannie, I just wanted to stop here for our first pause and say, I am rarely early and I am not tall. What kind of advice would you give to someone like me if I really wanted to see the changing of the guards?
Well, you know, Lisa, positioning is everything, because the world and his wife will be clustering around the railings of the palace, all trying to look over each other's heads, which just doesn't work. So if you understand the schedule of the guard change, you can really position yourself well. Now, the point of the guard change, there are 5 regiments of guards, you see, and the changing of the guard is the changing of the regiment every 24 hours. So the guard is a body of men, 30 men, all marching. And the old guard will come out of St. James Palace, which is halfway up the Mall, the Royal Road. They come out at 10:48. They will march down to Buckingham Palace into the courtyard. So if you're at St. James Palace at that time, you can march with them, which is great fun. If you don't do that, position yourself at the Wellington Barracks, which is to the left of the palace as you're looking at it. The new guard that will take over for the next 24 hours come out of there at 10:58 precisely. And they will march right past you, full band, everything. It's marvelous. Or another good tip, if you wait till the end of the guard change, the world and his wife, the Muggles, will leave by then. So at 11:40, the old guard come out of the palace and go to the barracks. And then at 11:45, the new guard will come out and march up to St. James Palace. So if you position yourself well, like a football match, you know, you can see all of this. Can I also mention as well, we saw the horse guards, the household cavalry. If you go to their parade ground in Whitehall at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they have what they call the dismount or the punishment parade. You see, in 1894, Queen Victoria popped in and she found that they were all boozing and gambling. And she was so horrified. She said, right, at 4 o'clock for the next 100 years, you have to be examined by an officer before you go to the stables. So people don't know they do this. So you go there and you'll be one of the few to see the household cavalry being formally dismounted, which is a sight to see.
I like that too, because it doesn't break up your day as much as having to be somewhere at 11. That's great advice, Jeannie. Thank you.
They know.
But for centuries, they lived closer to the River Thames, where, in the 11th century, King Edward the Confessor built the first Palace of Westminster. Over the centuries, that palace evolved to become this building and an icon of modern democracy. Eventually, representatives of local communities or commons gathered here to be near their king. They began meeting independently as the House of Commons. And to this day, Britain is ruled from here, in the Houses of Parliament. Visitors are welcome to queue up for a free look at the uppity House of Lords or the rowdier House of Commons in action. Like so much of the most medieval-looking architecture in Europe, this is actually over-the-top faux medieval. It's neo-Gothic, built in the 1800s, the Romantic Age. All across Europe, neo-Gothic was a reaction against the neoclassical Age of Revolution, which challenged royalty and religion. With this less cerebral, more romantic style, Victorian England reaffirmed its royal and Christian roots. People call this famous tower Big Ben, but it's actually the Queen Elizabeth Tower. Ben is the 13-ton bell behind the clock. Here's a fun way to make your sister envious. Hi, Jan. This is Rick. Audio postcard from London.
Jeannie, I just realized that for many of us, we haven't seen that tower without scaffolding on it for quite a few years. Can I come to London and see it without scaffolding anytime soon?
It's finished now. Oh, it's so beautiful because they've removed the black paint that restorers had put on over the years, and they've repainted it the original beautiful Victorian blue, and they've redone all the gold. They've replaced the little glass pieces on the clock faces. Oh, it's absolutely stunning. It is so lovely.
Oh, that's good to know.
Mhm.
An enormous royal palace once stretched all the way from Big Ben to Trafalgar Square at the end of this street. While the palace is long gone, its name survives, Whitehall, today Britain's most important street. The British Empire, which at one point ruled nearly a quarter of the world's population, was managed from here. And a Whitehall walk is filled with reminders of England's proud and hard-fought history. Stately reliefs and stern buildings seem to celebrate the empire upon which the sun never set. As it has for centuries, the Royal Horse Guard still keeps the royal family safe. And if you're here at the right time, you'll enjoy the ritual changing of this guard as well. Prime ministers like Winston Churchill have long lived and worked on Whitehall. Here, Churchill's wrapped in the iconic trench coat he wore as he led Britain through the dark days of World War II. Duck under sandbags and descend into the Churchill War Rooms. This was the secret underground nerve center of the British government's fight against the Nazis in the desperate battle for Britain. Shut down after victory in 1945 and ignored for decades, it's open today as a fascinating time warp for visitors to explore. Audio guides give it meaning.
On the morning of the 16th of August, 1945, the day after VJ Day and the end of the war, the map officers tidied their desks, switched out the lights for the first time in 6 years, and went home. And that's the way the room stayed.
You'll see the room where Churchill famously took his short naps. In this room, the progress of the entire war was followed as day-by-day movement of troops and convoys was charted. And this room was the communication hub from where Churchill maneuvered Britain to ultimate victory. The recent museum introduces you to Churchill the Man. It brings the colorful statesman to life, complete with his trademark cigar, bow tie, cognac, he loved his drink, and famous hat. You'll get a taste of Winston's irascibility, wit, work ethic, even the industry of kitschy knickknacks he inspired. Back out on Whitehall, there are monuments to other great English war heroes, and at the end of the street at Trafalgar Square is a memorial to the greatest English war hero of them all, the one-armed, one-eyed, and one-minded Admiral Horatio Nelson, looking out to sea. The year was 1805. Napoleon, with his mighty army, was poised just on the other side of the English Channel, preparing to invade. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles to the south, off of the coast of Spain, Admiral Nelson defeated the French fleet at the Battle of Trafalgar. Because Britannia ruled the waves, Napoleon was stopped. Bronze battle reliefs made of melted down French cannon decorate the column. These huggable lions are a hit with visitors. Trafalgar Square marks the very center of London. Big Ben is just a short walk down there past Admiral Nelson. Buckingham Palace, straight down that street. Soho, where all the nightlife is, just 6 blocks over there. And the National Gallery has the greatest collection of paintings anywhere in Britain. Right there is St. Martin's in the Field, a church that's famous for its classical music concerts and the charity work it does in this community.
I want to break in here for just a second because I have a tip for families. If you're in Trafalgar Square and you go to St. Martin's in the Fields, that church, I guarantee your kids will be delighted. It's my kids' favorite place to go have lunch because you actually get to eat in the cafeteria, which is in the crypt. So you're sort of spookily, ghoulishly eating your lunch over the graves. My kids didn't stop talking about that for a year. And you're supporting their community outreach. So it's a win-win.
And don't forget, Lisa, the lovely concerts, the candlelight concerts at night. Tickets are only £10, and you hear Mozart or Vivaldi of beautiful music in that gorgeous church with candlelight all around.
Oh, that's wonderful. Tell me a little bit more. Is that weekly, or when would I see it?
A couple of times a week they have it, but really most nights they have it at least 3 nights a week. If you go online, you know, they'll show you the whole program. But oh, it's just delightful.
Oh, that's a great tip. Let's just go a smidge further. Jeannie, I wanted to stop at this picture of the black cabs because they have a unique shape, and I found out something interesting from you that I hope that you can share with all of us. Why do they have that shape?
Yeah, well, they need to have a quite tall roof because, of course, gentlemen would be wearing the bowler hats. Ladies, remember, Ascot, you know, be wearing the nice big hats. So you need room in a taxi. Yeah, and they're that iconic shape. They're wonderful cars to drive. They turn on a coin. They turn like this. I used to have one. I used to have a second-hand one that I used to drive around London. That old
What
Austin.
kind of car is it?
Austins.
Austin. Did you have to have any sort of special license to drive your car? Did you have to pass any tests?
No, you see, taxi drivers have to do this very difficult examination. After about 10 years, a lot of them give up and retire. And then you can buy their taxis secondhand. You have to take the taxi license plate off the back. The problem I found is that when I was stopped at traffic lights, people would jump in the back and insist I take them places. I would say, sorry, this is a private car, go away. Sometimes I just wouldn't argue. I had a charity box in the back and I just say, put some money in the charity box.
Oh, that's fantastic. I like to take a taxi every time, at least once every visit when I'm in London, because I find the cabbies to be, you know, they're so full of local information, and they're also, they are chatty. And one of them told me that they have to take this insane test called the Knowledge, and they're very proud of it. I didn't know anything about that.
Yes, so they should be, because to be a licensed black cab driver, you have to take this examination. You have to know every street within a 6-mile radius of this picture, which is 25,000 streets. And they also have to learn the location of 10,000 landmarks like theatres, cinemas, swimming pools, hospitals, churches, all this kind of thing. It takes the average person between 2 and 4 years to learn all this. The fastest it's ever been done is by somebody with a photographic memory who did it in 3 months flat. But it is such a struggle to get all this information in. They've done autopsies on taxi drivers' brains, and their right hippocampus, which is where you store memory, is freakishly enlarged. They have larger brains than everybody else on the planet. Their brains literally explode.
Oh my God, you just blew my mind.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I've heard that the British like to put forth these tests for accreditation. And I heard that to become a Blue Badge guide, you also had to go through something pretty rigorous.
Oh my Lord. It's torture. I mean, you know, had I been a sheep, they wouldn't have been allowed to do it to me. It takes 2 years and you have to learn literally everything. I mean, you literally have to know all the streets, but then you also need to know, you know, the architect of that building, what's inside it, the date of it, all this kind of thing. You have to learn all of the great sites in London. I mean, for example, Westminster Abbey has 450 monuments in it, and the examiner can just say to you, well, tell me about that one. Tell me about this one. Tell me about that one. And you have to know them all or you fail. I mean, and 5 hours of written exams, as well as the practical exams on the sites. One question, Lisa, I still wake up screaming. It was, how many nails are in the door of St. George's Chapel in Windsor? Now, don't ask me, because I don't know. I still to this day don't know. I just pray nobody ever asks me, because I don't know.
That's not fair. Windsor's not even in London.
But it's the insane detail of the knowledge that you have to know, just in case somebody asks you.
Big as it is, London's easy to get around in. And once you're oriented, riding its double-decker buses can be both efficient and fun. For me, enjoying the view from the top deck is one of the great treats of this city. We're entering the historic core of London, the 1 square mile district locals call simply the city. While only a few thousand people actually live here, its 9 to 5 crowd numbers 500,000. This is Britain's Wall Street, thriving with big-time commerce and packed with banks. The city is also packed with history. This monument commemorates the devastating fire of 1666, which started here and burned down nearly all of London. These reliefs show in heroic terms how city leaders came together determined to rebuild. The great architect Christopher Wren was chosen to spearhead the project. And the city that rose from the ashes of that fire was decorated by the Wren-designed spires of some 50 churches. Christopher Wren spent 4 decades, the rest of his life, working on his grand vision. The centerpiece? This mighty cathedral, St. Paul's. Today, it's the symbol of London's resilience, its rise from the Great Fire, and of London's survival of the Blitz of World War II. The church is one of the world's biggest. Wren accentuated its spaciousness by the lack of decoration. Notice the simple ceiling and the clear glass lighting everything evenly. Today, only the west end of the church keeps Wren's original vision. In the 1800s, Queen Victoria called St. Paul's dim, dingy, and ungodly. So the east end of the church was then slathered with Victorian bling. Beautiful Victorian bling. While the church's survival in World War II was almost miraculous, the apse of the church did take a direct hit and was destroyed. Today, it's rebuilt as the American Memorial Chapel to honor our nation's contribution to the defense of Britain. We see Jesus, Mary, and George Washington. The American iconography includes stars, stripes, and eagles. And behind birds and plants native to the USA, it's a U.S. rocket, circa 1958, shooting up to the stars. The British are grateful to their World War II allies. The Roll of Honor lists the 28,000 American servicemen based in Britain who gave their lives.
Jeannie, I just wanted to share with our viewers a story that you shared with me once upon a time. I believe that you have a personal connection to the dome of St. Paul's, and I'm wondering if you would share that story with us.
I'd be glad to. See, the dome is very important to the people of Britain. It is an architectural masterpiece. I mean, imagine Christopher Wren was a great mathematician. So the whole building is worked out mathematically to please your eye. But the dome, imagine it's like 2 great bowls, one on top of the other. So the dome you see from the outside is not the one that you see from the inside. There's 2 with like a brick core in between the 2 holding them up. It's an absolute architectural masterpiece. It weighs 64,000 tons in weight. And you imagine Christopher Wren is building it 17th century. He has no computer or calculator to help him work out the mathematics of such a weight. So It's one of the world's great masterpieces. So because of this, during World War II, Hitler wanted more to destroy that dome than almost anything in London. He knew what a symbol it was to the people of London especially. So he ordered the Luftwaffe to get the Dome of St. Paul's at all costs. So the terrible Blitz started in September of 1940, 57 consecutive nights of night bombing. And that is almost impossible to imagine now. Can you imagine those planes encircling the dome, dropping fire bombs onto it because the dome is covered in lead, the timber structure holding it up underneath? If the 5 bombs had adhered, the whole thing would have gone up like a tinderbox. But every night of the Blitz, a team of insanely brave volunteers, 60 of them, took it in turns to guard the cathedral night and day. And when the fire bombs rained down, they climbed up to the dome. Now it's 365 feet above the ground. One terrible night, the 30th of December, 1940, 29 incendiary bombs hit that dome, and they scrambled out onto the dome. They rappelled, with ropes around their waists, bucket of sand to put out the incendiary bomb, a stick. They saved that cathedral with their bare hands, and I'm very proud to say that my father was one of them, which is why St. Paul's is so important. Sorry, I always tear up a bit when I talk about it, but it's not only a wonderful building, it's a symbol of overcoming impossible odds and just struggling through to the end. There's a very famous photograph of St. Paul's. You see the firebombing, you can imagine everything around it was flattened. So the sky would be full of smoke, and suddenly the smoke cleared and the dome is still there. Now, I can't tell you how important that was to the people of London. They said, oh, well, the old church can take it, and so can we.
Jeannie, I am speechless. I really am. I'm just gonna continue on and catch my breath because that's such an important story.
Climbing the dome is like climbing a 30-story building with no elevator. And the reward? A commanding view of London. Christopher Wren spent nearly half his life working on St. Paul's. At age 75, he got to see his son crown his masterpiece with this golden cross. At the peak of its empire, when the Union Jack flew over a quarter of the planet, England collected art and artifacts as fast as it collected colonies. This place, the British Museum, is the showcase for those extraordinary treasures. Its centerpiece is the Great Court, an impressive example of Europe's knack for preserving old architectural spaces by making them fresh, functional, and inviting. The stately Reading Room, a temple of knowledge and high thinking, was the study hall for Oscar Wilde, Rudyard Kipling, and T.S. Eliot. Karl Marx researched right here while writing Das Kapital. The British Museum is the chronicle of Western civilization. You can study 3 great civilizations, Egypt, Assyria, and Greece, in one fascinating morning. The Egyptian collection is the greatest outside of Egypt. It's kicked off with the Rosetta Stone, which provided the breakthrough in deciphering ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Discovered in 1799, it told the same story in 3 languages: Greek, a modern form of Egyptian, and ancient Egyptian. This enabled archaeologists to compare the 2 languages they understood with the ancient Egyptian, which was yet to be deciphered. Thanks to this stone, they broke the code, opening the door to understanding a great civilization. The Egypt we think of, pyramids, mummies, pharaohs, and guys who walk funny, lasted from about 3000 to 1000 BC. It was a time of unprecedented stability, very little change in government, religion, or arts. Imagine 2,000 years of Eisenhower. Egyptian art was art with a purpose. It placated the gods. The entire pantheon, a cosmic zoo of deities, was sculpted and worshipped. and it served as propaganda for the pharaohs. They ruled with unquestioned authority and were considered gods on earth. And much of the art was for dead people, for a smoother departure and a happier afterlife. In ancient Egypt, you could take it with you. Corpses were painstakingly mummified. The internal organs were removed and put in jars. Then the body was preserved with pitch, dried, and wrapped from head to toe. The wooden coffin was painted with magic spells and images thought to be useful in the next life. The finely decorated coffins were put into a stone sarcophagus like this. These were then placed in a tomb, along with the allotted baggage for that ultimate trip. The Great Pyramids were just giant tombs for Egypt's most powerful, carefully designed to protect their precious valuables for that voyage into the next life. In its waning years, Egypt was conquered by Assyria, present-day Iraq. These winged lions guarded an Assyrian palace nearly 900 years before Christ.
Jeannie, when we were talking about what you love in London, you said, Lisa, I would like to talk about the British Museum as it holds a special place in my heart. And I was hoping that you could share why that is with us.
Well, I think it's very important to try and understand the past. I mean, they do say, isn't it, if you don't understand history, you're condemned to repeat it. And I just think it's wonderful to feel the human connection over this great howling gulf of millennia, if you like. I mean, for example, I think you and I both love the Assyrian galleries because they contain such wonderful art. I mean, Assyria, basically they start in northern Iran, and by the 700s, they have covered literally the whole of what we now call the Middle East, really. It was a huge empire. They invent writing, they invent cities, the great biblical cities of Nimrud, Nineveh, you know, these are Assyrian cities. These cities would have great gates guarded by great creatures like this, which are called Lamassu. And they are there to prevent evil coming into the city. And they're amazing beasts. I mean, they have the bodies of lions, the wings of eagles, the head of demons. And Rick likes to say they have the beards of ZZ Top, which I really don't like. But the ones I like come from an ancient city called Khorsabad, and they are even bigger than these. They're huge. They weigh 16 tons apiece. But what I love about them, in the base of these great beasts, the soldiers guarding the gates, obviously bored on sentry duty, have carved into the stone a board game. And I mean, these are 3,000 years old, and you can just picture these soldiers sat there saying, oh, I'm really fed up, you know, when am I going to be relieved from my post? Let's have another game, you know, and throwing the dice. It's that human connection that I love, you know, being able to almost touch the past.
Well said.
Assyria considered itself the lion of early Middle Eastern civilizations. It was a nation of hardy and disciplined warriors. Assyrian kings showed off their power in battle and by hunting lions. This dying lioness, roaring in pain, was carved as Assyria was falling to the next mighty power, Babylon. History is a succession of seemingly invincible superpowers, which all eventually fall. Greece, during its golden age, roughly 400 BC, set the tone of so much of Western civilization to follow. The city of Athens was the site of a cultural explosion, which within a couple of generations essentially invented our notion of democracy, theater, literature, mathematics, science, philosophy, and so much more. An evocative remnant of Greece's glory days is the sculpture which once decorated the Parthenon, a temple on the Acropolis Hill in Athens. Here, a long procession of citizens honors the goddess Athena. The carvings of the temple's pediment, even in their ruined state, are a masterpiece, showing gods and goddesses celebrating the birthday of Athena. The Greeks prided themselves on creating order out of chaos, here symbolized by the struggle between half-animal centaurs and civilized humans. First, the centaurs get the upper hand. Then, the humans rally and drive them off. In Golden Age Greece, civilization finally triumphed over barbarism. London has thriving shopping districts. Oxford Street is lined with big department stores. It's fun to feel the energy of this dynamic city. And Piccadilly, the city's most touristy square, has a magnetic attraction all its own. With its tipsy yet somehow balanced statue of Eros in the center, this is where worlds of temptations fan out in all directions. Simply wandering around London as evening approaches and people come out to play is an experience in itself. Soho is particularly lively. The people watching is fascinating. And talk about variety.
This is thriving with restaurants.
Yes, we're in Soho. It's full of excellent restaurants. It's a big centre for media, the arts. There's a big gay community here. Always humming, always buzzing. One of the marvellous things about London is that it's such a mix. We used to have an enormous empire spanning the globe, and as a result, lots of different nationalities came here. This part of London is the part that we call Chinatown.
Okay, so dim sum, this is the place.
Definitely. And of course, Soho is all about theatre. There are at least 30 theatres within a 10-minute walk from this spot, running the whole gamut. Musical, comedy, Shakespeare even.
Jeannie, I think that she is even maybe underplaying how many theaters there are in London and how easy it is to see a play. It's definitely on my agenda every time I come, but I think that you go very often. Is that true?
Oh, well, why wouldn't I? You see, theatre is so affordable in London. I'm always horrified when friends tell me how expensive it is for you guys to go to the theatre, because here we have the half-price theatre ticket booth in Leicester Square, and you can get really nice seats for £30. I had a look today, some shows were going for £17. The Globe Theatre, Shakespeare's Globe, if you go as a groundling and you stand, it's £5. The Great National Theatre, which is 3 theatres in the one big building, sponsored by the government, so they do day tickets at £20. On Fridays, it's £10. Now, Britt was talking about just 10 minutes from where she is. In the West End, there are 60 shows on at the moment. And if you go a little way into the suburbs, 80 shows a night. And now even on Sundays, some shows are running. So I think it's the best theatrical, sort of scene in the world. I don't think any other city can compare with London for that.
Oh, that's news.
Mm.
Shows on Sunday sometimes now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where would I get tickets? Would I have to buy them months in advance online, or could I get them, you said at the National Theatre, they have some day of tickets?
Yes, well, it depends what show you want to see, of course. Some are huge and sell out, so you should always try to get them in advance. But my advice is to Google cheap London theatre tickets, and all kinds of websites will come up. You can get really good deals actually online. And there's some very exciting stuff coming up this year. I've made a list, if I may tell you. Coming up, we have Amy Adams, Ralph Fiennes, Mackenzie Crook, who's the odd-looking one from Pirates of the Caribbean, Mark Rylance, who won the Oscar for Bridge of Spies, Vanessa Redgrave, who I think is one of the finest actors on the planet, Taron Egerton, who was in Rocket Man. He was so good as Elton John, if you remember. And if you like Game of Thrones, both Emilia Clarke and Kit Harington are performing in different shows. So, you can see some really good stars coming up this year. But you
That's
can just pop along to the half-price theatre ticket booth, see what's on that night and just go. That's what I frequently do.
I noticed that you have given up on your tea and you seem to be having something else.
Yes.
What's that about?
Well, we were talking about Soho after all. This is Pimm's. Pimm's is a kind of fruit cup, and you put fruit in it. You see, I have strawberries and orange and mint and cucumber, and you top it up with Sprite is the equivalent, what I would call lemonade. It tastes like the scrummiest fruit boost. It's very good for you because it is full of fruit, 1 in 5 and all this kind of stuff. But the trouble is, a few of these and I'll fall off the chair, so I'll go easy. Don't worry.
I believe in your health plan, Jeannie.
I'm going to live forever. I follow Winston Churchill's health plan. He drank, he smoked, he couldn't have had a more stressful life. He never did any exercise whatsoever, and he died aged 92 in his own bed. So I rest my case.
A short taxi ride away is Westminster Abbey. This most historic church in the English-speaking world is where kings and queens have been crowned and buried since 1066. While it was first built in the 11th century, much of what we see today is 14th century. When there's a royal wedding, the world looks on as, amid all this splendor, thousands of Britain's glitterati gather under these graceful Gothic arches. The centerpiece is the tomb of Edward the Confessor, who founded the abbey, and surrounding Edward are the tombs of 29 other kings and queens. This is the tomb of Queen Elizabeth I. Her royal orb symbolizes she was queen of the entire globe. The abbey is filled with the remains of people who put the great in Britain: saints, musicians, scientists, and soldiers. For lovers of English literature, strolling through Poets' Corner can be a pilgrimage in itself.
Jeannie, are these part of the many hundred monuments or memorials that you were talking about?
Yes, and of course there are always new ones going in. I mean, for example, Stephen Hawking, the great scientist, buried there a few years ago. He has such a lovely inscription on his tomb. It says, "Here lies what was mortal of Stephen Hawking." Don't you think that's lovely?
That is lovely.
Mm-hmm.
King Henry VII's Lady Chapel, with its colorful windows and fanciful banners, has the festive air of a medieval pageant. The elaborate ceiling is a fine example of fan vaulting, a style that capped the Gothic age. At the far end, a wall of modern stained glass marks the Royal Air Force Chapel. It honors the fighter pilots of all nations who died defending Britain in 1944. With saints in stained glass, heroes in carved stone, and the remains of England's greatest citizens under the floorstones, Westminster Abbey is the national church and the religious heart of England. London's subway, fondly known as the Tube, is one of this planet's great people movers, and it's easy to master. To avoid slow-moving ticket queues, buy your Tube pass from machines. Then, simply swipe yourself in and out until your prepaid account needs topping up. Follow signs to the right platform. Visualize the layout of the city, and remember, lines are labeled north, south, east, or west. Each train line has 2 directions and therefore 2 platforms. Signs list the line, direction, and stops served by each platform. Because some tracks are shared by several lines, signboards announce which train's next and how many minutes till it arrives. Final destinations are displayed above the windshield, and always,
mind the gap.
Once on board, you can track your progress. Confused? Many locals speak English. Our stop is King's Cross. Helpful signs show the best street exit for you, saving lots of walking. The British Library is right this way. The British Library is the National Archive. The statue of Isaac Newton measuring the immensity of the universe symbolizes the library's purpose: to preserve the record of man's endless search for knowledge. The massive building fills 180 miles of shelving with over 12 million books. For sightseers, only one room matters, the Treasures Room. It showcases early Gospels on papyrus, the first complete New Testament, written in Greek from the 4th century. Illuminated manuscripts with pages lovingly illustrated by monks, some of the finest art from Europe's Middle Ages. And the Gutenberg Bible from 1455. Gutenberg's revolutionary movable metal type made printing affordable. By bringing information to the masses, this innovation helped power Europe into the modern age. The Magna Carta from 1215 documents the first steps towards government by people rather than kings, and the king was forced to hang his seal on it.
Jeannie, would you mind teaching this Yankee a little bit about why the Magna Carta is so important?
Well, why it's so important is that before Magna Carta, the king's power was absolute. I mean, if the king wanted, he could just throw you into prison, lock you up, throw away the key, not even tell your family where you were, take your property, whatever he wanted, take your wife, whatever he felt like. So King John pushed things too far, and his barons, his powerful, sort of the landowners, revolted against him, besieged him at Windsor Castle, forced him to meet them at the field of Runnymede, the famous field. So June the 15th, 1215, he signs this document which limits his power. And there's 63 clauses, but luckily for us, the Archbishop of Canterbury of the time was present, and he snuck in 2 clauses, clause 39 and 40, which they didn't even notice at the time that he was signing. Not important, but they are now the bedrock of English law and of the American Constitution. No man shall be denied or sold justice, and no man shall be put in prison without trial. So it's the birth of civil liberties. Now, because most of Magna Carta is quite archaic, there are only 4 clauses that are still extant in law. But I mean, it's not only our law, your constitution, but it's gone all around the world as the basis of civil freedoms then.
So this would have been the death of absolute monarchism in Britain,
Yes.
which probably saved it, in the 18th century when things were falling in France and other countries, do you think?
Well, yes, and I mean, don't forget 1649, we cut the head off Charles I, which kind of effectively ends the power of kings, really, doesn't it? Kind of hard to insist on things with your head cut off, but yeah, there we are.
That is.
But you're
Thank
right. No, it's this idea that the king is appointed by God, so therefore you obey the king as you obey God. That's the idea, which Magna Carta is the start of chipping away at that.
Well, thank you, because a lot of us have heard about the Magna Carta all our lives and didn't really know why it was so important. So thank you, Jeannie.
Cool.
Cases are dedicated to the titans of English literature, showing, for instance, early editions of Shakespeare's plays. You'll see precious musical manuscripts, a handwritten score of Handel's Messiah, a Beethoven work tracing his stormy creative process, and handwritten Beatles lyrics. Ponder the evolution of maps. In 1350, this view came with Jerusalem at the center. By 1550, with this, you could plan your next trip to England. Many of London's top sites front the River Thames, which has become a transportation thoroughfare for tourists. We're sailing from Westminster, under Big Ben, to the Tower of London, enjoying an informative narration with the views.
Somerset House, built over 200 years ago as a private residence for the Earls and Dukes of Somerset.
Tower Bridge looks medieval, but it was actually built with a steel skeleton in 1894 in full medieval style, to match its famous neighbor just a few steps away. The Tower of London goes back to the Norman conquest.
People were fainting in there.
William, Duke of Normandy, became William the Conqueror when he crossed the English Channel in 1066 and took the throne of England. To help establish his rule, he had this awesome, and really awesome in its day, fortress built.
Its purpose put 15 feet of stone between him and his new subjects. This original tower, the White Tower, gave the castle complex its name. The style of the age was Romanesque, which the English call Norman for the invaders who imported it. This charming chapel of St. John, dating to 1080 and one of the oldest in England, provides a rare look at pure Norman architecture. Round Roman-style arches and thick walls. You'll see an intimidating collection of medieval weaponry and armor. Your entry includes a peek at the most dazzling crown jewels in Europe. No cameras allowed. And an entertaining tour with one of the yeoman warders, or beefeaters.
Please denote, this is still a royal palace. Although no longer a royal residence, we should not lose sight of the fact that all of our kings and queens. They lived here for more than 500 years.
The tower.
So Jeannie, I just wanted to share with everybody my strategy for going to the Tower of London, which is designed to keep my kids from going insane when I take them. So we buy our tickets online ahead of time. We go to the tower about a half an hour before it opens, and we go to the separate ticket holders line and we wait there. And while we're standing there, my husband usually goes off to Starbucks and gets us all pastries and coffee to fuel us up. And then when we go through security and they look through our bags and check our tickets, we go straight to the jewels, because I'm a big jewel person. So you can see the crown jewels 4 or 5 times on the revolving walkway before the crowds get there. And then we come back to take the Beefeater tour.
And don't forget, if you come on our Best of London tour, we actually get invited into the tower before it opens to the public. So we're in line before the doors are even opened. How
Wow.
cool is that?
That's very cool.
Oh, and you love jewels. Can I tell you about the new crown that's on display, which you won't have seen yet? It is the Prince of Wales's crown that was made for him in 1969 when he was invested as Prince of Wales in Carnarvon Castle. Now, the original crown, the Duke of Windsor, you know, the Queen's uncle, he had somehow packed it in his luggage when he left this country with Wallis Simpson. So it disappeared for a bit. So they had to make a new crown. Look at this, and Julianne is kindly sharing it with us. You see the globe on the top? That's actually a ping pong ball covered in Welsh gold.
No.
And you see that there are jewels around it. Those are diamonds, square cut diamonds set in platinum in the shape of the constellation of Scorpio, which is Prince Charles's birth sign. Isn't that mind blowing?
That is so cool.
75 diamonds, 12 emeralds, and that's ermine fur around the bottom, the royal fur.
And one
I
ping pong ball. You're
One
not
ping
joking.
pong ball. But if I hadn't told you, you wouldn't have known, would you? And it's Welsh gold. I think it's quite futuristic. Some people don't like it, but I think it's gorgeous.
And they had to make it because his uncle took the correct
Yes,
one?
had waltzed off with the original one. Mm-hmm. He actually managed to, you know, wander off with quite a lot of his mother's jewels for Wallis.
Oh.
Mm.
I was reading a book about the ravens at the Tower of London, and I want to know, have you read this book? I think it's called The Raven Master.
Absolutely. It's written by Chris Scaife, who is the Beefeater, the yeoman warder, whose job it is to look after the ravens. And he has an uncanny connection with those birds. They are important because we have a legend that if ever the ravens leave the tower crumbles, the monarchy crumbles, terrible things happen to the kingdom. So we have 6 official ravens and 2 stand-ins in case anything happens to an official raven. They've all got names and serial numbers. They are all enrolled in the British Army. And they're even paid a daily ration of meat and biscuits, dog biscuits soaked in blood, because they are scavenger birds. But Chris has an uncanny bond with these birds. Always before, they would clip their wings so they couldn't fly away. They love Chris so much, he just trims them a little bit. They can fly out to the wharf on the river, and they come back at night to him because they love him so much. He's been doing research with Leicester University into raven intelligence, and they have found amazing things. Those birds are so bright. They're much brighter than dogs. They have apparently the same intelligence as a 4-year-old child, which blows my mind. You see them imitating people. I mean, one raven, Merlina, she considered Chris Scaife to be her personal property. And if she felt he wasn't paying her enough attention, she would play dead. She'd lie on the lawn with her wings spread and her feet in the air. And a tourist would go, "Oh my God, she's dead." And after a bit, you know, she'd open an eye and say, "Well, where's Chris?"
You're joking.
Yeah, they can learn to talk, you know. They can learn to talk just like parrots or minor birds. A few years ago, we had an amazing raven called Horace. Horace could repeat right back at you anything you said to him. So the soldiers guarding the crown jewels took this unrivaled opportunity to teach Horace the vilest swear words that you've ever heard. And he was so clever, he would know if I had a really religious or easily offendable group, up would come Horace. He was so rude to one poor lady in one of my groups, she actually fainted. She passed out cold into my arms. So they have now banished Horace. He's in London Zoo. It's the first time anybody in 1,000 years has been banished from the Tower of London. You know, it's usually the other way around. Another one of the ravens has started to talk, and people are starting to get worried that this will happen again because, you know, the Queen visits the tower several times a year. They're afraid that, you know, this bird will come up and open its beak. But I mean, I always think, well, the Queen lived with Prince Philip for 73 years. So, you know, the Queen is used to the language of sailors, shall I say. So I don't think she's shockable.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Tower marks the oldest part of London, a district called the City. Today, this is the financial center of Britain. But these days, bank headquarters fill shiny skyscrapers, and many of the elegant original bank buildings survive as fancy pubs. Their vaults now filled with kegs of real English ale. In pubs, you order at the bar. Lager is the cold carbonated American-style beer. Ales and bitters are the more traditional English choice. Only confused tourists leave a tip. Further down the River Thames is Greenwich. Since many of its sights are free and it's cheap to get here on the tube, it makes for a great budget day out. While still well within the city limits of London, Greenwich feels like a small town. Visitors enjoy lively market streets and fascinating museums. Tudor kings who ruled in the 15th century favored their palace at Greenwich. Henry VIII was born here. Later kings commissioned the top architects, Inigo Jones and Christopher Wren, to beautify the town and palace. Old Royal Naval College was originally a hospital founded by King William and Queen Mary in 1692 to care for naval officers. Today, the Navy's gone and the lavish place is open to the public. Originally intended as a dining hall for retired naval officers, this sumptuously decorated room features one of the largest painted ceilings in Europe, 112 feet long. It's a big propaganda scene, glorifying the building's royal founders and their defeat of the French. Under his foot, William's crushing a dark figure with a broken sword, Louis XIV. He's handing a red cap representing liberty to a woman holding the reins of a white horse, symbolizing Europe. Another woman hands him an olive branch, a sign of peace.
The message, which you can see without craning your neck with the help of this handy mirror: King William granted Europe liberty by defeating the French.
A stately park turns an adjacent hill into an inviting people zone. From its bluff, visitors enjoy sweeping views of Greenwich, the Docklands, and the distant London skyline. Crowning the hill is the Royal Observatory, founded in the late 1600s by King Charles II. Its purpose? Improving maritime navigation by more accurately charting the night sky. Visitors gain an appreciation of how exciting breakthroughs in astronomy and timekeeping led to Britain's mastery of the sea. For ships to know their location while at sea, mariners needed to know the precise time from a reference point on the globe. With this, they could solve what was called the problem of longitude. After a huge effort, in 1760, John Harrison built this clock and figured it out. And by 1772, this fine timekeeper was portable and functioned without a pendulum, critical because pendulums don't work at sea. Along with marking global time, Greenwich marks the Earth's prime meridian. Outside the observatory, visitors line up to grab a photo as they straddle the line, to be at precisely 0 degrees longitude, with one foot in the east hemisphere and the other in the west. The south bank of the Thames, once a depressed industrial zone, now thrives with restaurants, condos, and cultural centers. All tied together by the Jubilee Promenade. This riverside lane, popular with strollers, joggers, and bikers, stretches from the Tower Bridge to Big Ben, with plenty of curiosities and trendy pubs along the way. And just a block inland at the Borough Market, you can still feel a little of the grit of the South Bank before its revitalization. 1,000 years ago, this marked the edge of town, and farmers brought fresh goods here to the city gates. Today, the descendant of London's oldest vegetable market fills this Victorian arcade.
Jeannie, I've been a big fan of this market since it was featured in the movie Bridget Jones' Diary. Can you give us a little bit more information about visiting Borough Market?
Sure, it's open 7 days a week now, and you need to come to London Bridge Underground Station. It's right there. It's open from 10 till 5. I would try and avoid it at lunchtime because obviously it's heaving then. Saturday afternoons, it's very busy. If you can come in the morning, it's perfect. And there are 3 main areas. One is for street food from all around the world. Another is for small providers. The third area is for larger suppliers. The big thing with the Borough Market, they're very big on the provenance of food, you know, wanting to know the source of that farm, that dairy, you know, where that food comes from. So, I mean, it's mind-boggling. It's just a culinary explosion. It's just wonderful.
Do you
My
have any?
favorite thing, I love cheese. Were you going to ask me what I like best? I hoped you were. I love cheese. So there is one shop there, which is called Kappa Kassane Dairy, and it does toasted cheese sandwiches. Honestly, they are the best in the world. They do a mixture of 3 cheeses, Welsh cheddar, which is delicious, Ogleshield cheese, which is London's version of raclette, the Swiss cheese, French Comté, all mixed up with some mustard, some leek, and some chopped onion, and some secret thing that they won't tell you, grilled. I can't tell you. Oh, it's just, yes. I mean, you might as well slap it straight onto your hips, but who cares? You're on holiday. It is just the most delicious thing ever.
And Julianne has posted the name of that shop in the chat feature for everyone, and I am making note of it and putting it on my next itinerary in London. That sounds fantastic.
This gourmet cheese shop keeps its devoted following happy and introduces visitors to fine English cheeses with a passion.
There's a lot more British cheese than people think. Even British people coming in here are surprised by the variety. I mean, you can see it comes in all shapes and sizes. You've got cow's milk, sheep's milk, goat's milk, such a wide variety of styles. Yeah, I mean, these are all artisan, very small cheesemakers. Basically handmade cheese. Everything we sell is handmade. Well, here we've got basically a cheddar and a Stilton. Now, Stilton's unusual, unlike the cheddar, because that has to be made in a specific area. Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, or Leicestershire. It's the only British cheese which has that sort of control on it. So there's only 6 makers of Stilton in the world, and of the 6, these are probably the smallest and do it most by hand. And what you get is a creamier Stilton. Try this. This is what we call a proper cheddar. So it's made in the Cheddar region, about 2 hours west of London, Somerset. It's cloth bound, 50-pound wheels, unpasteurised milk, and it's their own herd of cows as well that it comes from, the milk.
Our riverside walk finishes with a classic view of Big Ben in the halls of Parliament. And for a cheap and easy flight over London, we're riding the London Eye. The world's largest observation wheel is designed like a giant bicycle wheel. A pan-European undertaking, it's made with British steel, Dutch engineering, and German, French, and Italian parts. It runs efficiently and almost silently as visitors enjoy a 30-minute once-around rotation. From the top of the 450-foot high wheel, the highest public viewpoint in London, Big Ben looks small and in one of the world's greatest cities seems to stretch on and on forever.
It's a city you can enjoy coming back to for the rest of your life. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rick Steves. Until next time, keep on traveling.
I 100% agree with Rick that London is a city that you can keep coming back to time and time again. I am wanting to thank Jeannie Carmichael for being with us tonight and sharing all of her knowledge. We traditionally have a word from our sponsor before we get to our questions, and I am taking that role this evening. The only Rick Steves tour that I have been on twice as a tour member is the Best of London in 1 week, the one that Jeannie guides so often we've talked about a couple of times tonight. I think one of the things that's great about it, of course, all of the things that we've talked about, but you can also take it at any time of year. The first time I took it was in February, and it was fantastic because you're inside all the time. The theater is great, everything. And the second time I took it was in October. It was the same. It doesn't need to be May or September, June or July. London is a great destination any time of year. So, Jeannie, are you ready to answer some questions?
You betcha.
Okay. Matt asks, can tourists see number 10 Downing Street?
Not really. In Mrs. Thatcher's time, the IRA fired a rocket bomb at it. So ever since, both ends of it are cut off. But you can stand, at the end and peer down, but you can't really see it very well.
Okay. Brent wants to know, what, in your opinion, is the best day trip out of London?
Oh, there's so many, Brett. That's the trouble. I love Hampton Court Palace because I particularly like the Tudor period. That's easy to get to. How about Bletchley Park? Have you heard of the Enigma Code? The place where they broke the Enigma Code. That's fascinating. How about Brighton on the seacoast? Beautiful buildings, fantastic antique shopping, great sort of artistic vibe there. Stonehenge. It's easy to get to Stonehenge from London by train. Honestly, it's really easy to get. There's such a lot. Depends what your interests are, really.
Well, the trains are so fast as well.
Mm-hmm.
Katharina wants to know, is the subway tube easy to navigate?
Oh, very much so. I mean, when I go to New York, I have no clue, none at all, hopeless. But London is really simple because the different train lines are color coded and you just follow the colors. You don't have to remember the names at all, just follow the colors. And the great thing is, Juliana, remember that most people speak English and Londoners love visitors. They're only too happy to help. And there are always helpful staff in the underground. Bear in mind, for me, a subway is a pedestrian tunnel under a street. So you need to ask for the tube or the underground. We use different words for the same thing sometimes.
Sure. Clement asks, now that the Queen resides at Windsor, will Buckingham Palace be open more often to visitors? It's a great question.
Oh yeah, I certainly hope so. Prince Charles has indicated that he wants to share the palaces more with the public. So I'm thinking that that is a possible indication that they will open the palace much more, for the rest of the year. I wish they would, because the Royal Collection has 1 million objects in it. And I think we should be able to see more of them. It's not right that these beautiful things are locked up and we can't see them. So fingers crossed, Clement. I certainly hope so.
Continuing on with the royal family, Brenda is going to be in London for the Queen's Jubilee in June and wants to know about special activities during this time.
Oh, it'll be fabulous, Brenda. I mean, at the Tower, what they're doing, they're digging up the moat and they are planting 20 million wildflowers in the moat, which will bloom because the Queen has granted a special long holiday weekend, June 2nd, 3rd, 4th. It'll all be blooming by then. We're going to light beacons throughout the country. There are going to be tea parties throughout the country, huge concert at Buckingham Palace, street parties. Oh, it's just going to be the best fun. And we're having a competition to invent a new dessert for the Queen, a new pudding. I'm going to enter my nectarine trifle, which I think is pretty worth a prize, to be honest.
Oh, well, best of luck.
Mhm.
Stephen wants to know, how is the London Theatre doing coming out of COVID?
Very well. It started out slowly because we were all a bit nervous. The restrictions now are almost all lifted. You don't see many people wearing masks. They don't check you now, going into the theatre. I think it seems to be fiercer restrictions in the States than it is here. No, theatre's thriving again. We're all desperate to get back. You can imagine, to get back to see it.
Kathy wants to know, does a cuppa mean a cup of tea or a cup of coffee? The Seattleite in me is.
Traditionally, it means a cup of tea, but we're not going to split hairs. Kathy, if you want to call it a cup of coffee, that's fine. It's fine by me.
Let's see. Oh, Rob says, God bless your dad, Jeannie.
Oh, that's awfully kind. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Well, I find my tour members are often quite worried about having afternoon tea, and they're worried about the correct procedures. Please don't worry about it. Honestly, you're our guests, so you can do whatever you like. That's fine. One of the best definitions of manners I've ever heard. Prince Charles was at a very posh banquet and they were having shrimp. So they had little, water bowls for their fingers. And one of the guests was unfamiliar with that, picked up the water bowl and drank from it. And some of the other guests sort of snickered. And Prince Charles instantly picked up his and did the same. So to me, that's the height of manners. If you have guests, whatever they do is fine. So whatever way makes you comfortable.
That is, manners should make other people more comfortable around you,
Absolutely.
not less.
Yes, indeed. Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Oh, well, this is the opposite of what we were just talking about, but Leonard wants to know, what is the right way to drink tea? Do you pour the milk first or the tea first? And what time of day can one have tea?
Traditionally, afternoon tea is between 3 and 5. Or you can have a high tea, which is slightly later, say 5 to 7. High tea will have maybe quiche, some meat. High tea is heavier, is more serious food. I would always pour the tea first and then add the milk, because tea is boiling hot. It could curdle the milk. It just seems logical to me to add the milk later. Also, you couldn't see the right color for the tea, could you? If you could put too much milk in if you did it first.
That makes a lot of sense. And don't do what I did when I was 12 and was going to a tea and they offered lemon and milk and I put them together because I didn't know and it curdled.
Yes.
Was disgusting.
It's disgusting. Yes. Oh.
Anonymous wants to know, what is a good neighborhood to stay in London?
Oh, that depends what you want to see, really. All around the British Museum there's lots of small sort of family style hotels there. That's a good area to stay. Bear in mind, the further out you stay, the cheaper the hotels will be. And our underground system is so good, it doesn't actually matter, how far out you are. You'll be able to get into central London very quickly. The Docklands area also has a lot of, quite cheap accommodation, and that has excellent transport into the centre of London. Obviously, if you could afford a hotel in Knightsbridge or Kensington, that would be great, but they're more expensive.
Thank you.
Bear in mind, I think you'll be shocked that the hotel rooms are quite small compared to American rooms. But heck, you won't be in the room for long because there's just so much to see. You'll only be there to sleep.
No, I'm busy. I'm at the theater.
Mm-hmm.
Clint wants to know, how can you book a Blue Badge guide in advance?
Well, I'm hoping that Julianne has put in the chat. We have a website which is called Guide London. And Guide London has 600 Blue Badge guides. It tells you who's available, what their particular interests are. Are they good with kids? Are they good with museums? all that kind of thing. So Guide London is a very good website to go to. Thank you, Clint, for asking.
And then Dean asks, he's heard there are some canals in London. Do you recommend taking a canoe there? And I hope he doesn't mean taking a canoe on the plane with him to go there. He means hire a canoe.
There are canals in London, Clint, but some of them are not that clean, because bear in mind, canals were industrial. You know, they were literally liquid roads. What I would recommend, if you want to canoe, go either to the Serpentine Lake, which is in the middle of Hyde Park, or the Olympic Park is fabulous, and you can do all kinds of boating there. And they've cleaned it all up. You know, it's beautiful.
Thank you, Jeannie. Let's wrap up with our last question. Jeannie, what is one of your favorite quiet or lesser known places in London?
I really like, there's a beautiful park in West London in Kensington called Holland Park. And in that park is beautiful planting, but my favorite place is the Japanese garden. And what they did, they invited gardeners to come from Kyoto in Japan, which is the great garden city of Japan. And they created, working with British gardeners, this fabulous garden, which is, you know, all based on Japanese principles. It has a lovely lake, sort of a small pond, well, a small lake, large pond, full of amazingly huge koi carp, waterfall coming down into it, beautiful rocks, lovely trees. You're not allowed to make a noise there. They ask you to be quiet and tranquil, and it is the most lovely, calming place. And Japanese young couples who are getting married come to pose, you know, underneath the trees by this, you know, in their full wedding gear. It's so lovely to see.
Jeannie, it has been lovely having you tonight. Thank you for sharing your city with us.
Not at all. It's been my very great pleasure. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope to see you in London sometime. And Lisa, please give my love to Scott and the kids, and can I go to bed now?
Yes, I will, and yes, you can.
4 in the morning. The things I do for love of you, really.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Good night, everybody.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I would like to invite you to join us again next week when Gabe is hosting tour guide extraordinaire Sasho Golub, and they're discussing Slovenia. And then the week after that, Julianne is making her Monday Night Travel host debut, and she's going to be talking about Greek Easter with Apostolos Douros. So please join us then, and thank you for being here tonight.